is Mr. Everton. This is our last video for Unit 1 on the modern world and globalization. And today we're going to talk about terrorism, which is, an unpleasant topic. And the video will be a fairly unpleasant one because we're talking about violence and murder and stuff like that. So, just expect that as you watch the video. I mean, I'm leading off with a really unpleasant image of the attack on the U.S. Capitol building in January of 2017, which is an example of terrorism. That's controversial to some people because it involves one of the two major U.S. political parties. And if you're a Republican, that might make you mad that I'm calling it terrorism. But I think, if you look objectively at the definition of terrorism, you have to include this, right? Why did some Republicans, I mean, certainly most Republicans are not in this category, but, why did some Republicans attack the U.S. Capitol? They were angry over false allegations that the election had been stolen from their preferred candidate, and they were trying to change the results of the election through violence, attacking police at the Capitol, leading to the death of some of them, leading to the death of one of the rioters. So, for our purposes, a definition of terrorism is whenever somebody uses illegal violence to create fear in order to try to achieve a political goal. Terrorism is like you can't get the thing you want to happen, and so you use violence to try to intimidate your opponents into letting you have your way. That's terrorism. Can be tricky to decide when something is terrorism or when it isn't, but this is what the word means. So one important example of terrorism is probably the most famous one, the one that most people think of, is the attacks on the United States on September 11th, 2001. So that's Osama bin Laden, if you didn't know. He was the leader of a terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda, and he was very clear in expressing why Al-Qaeda flew those commercial airliners into the World Trade Center, killing thousands of people. He was very clear about why they did that. He said the reason why was because the United States had troops in Saudi Arabia, which is a sacred place for Muslims, and he thought that was unacceptable. Al-Qaeda believes that that's unacceptable. And also because of continued U.S. support for Israel. Israel is a country that, the national religion of Israel is Judaism, and it's on land that is also claimed by a Muslim group of people called the Palestinians. We're going to learn more about that later in the year. But because the United States supports Israel and gives it money and weapons, Osama bin Laden was very angry about that. His entire terrorist organization was very angry about that. And in order to punish the United States and try to, get them to stop doing those things, that is why the terrorist attacks of September 11th happened. A lot of times people make the mistake of thinking of terrorism as something associated with Muslim people, and it's really not. Terrorism is done by all kinds of people. So, for example, there is a long-standing terrorist organization in Ireland called the Irish Republican Army, who've committed all kinds of terrorist acts, car bombings, and murders of innocent people. Because that time period is the time period that when the Irish Republican Army was most active and did most of these crimes was called the Troubles, and it lasted from the late 60s until 1998 when they made sort of a peace deal, and the Troubles ended. But the reason why the Irish Republican Army committed all those acts of terrorism was because they were angry about British control of Ireland. Britain colonized Ireland a long time ago, and the Irish Republican Army and other Irish terrorist groups wanted Great Britain out of Ireland and to not have anything to do with Ireland anymore. So they commit acts of terrorism to try to create fear to drive them out. Another example, the Munich Olympics of 1972. The Olympics happens every 4 years. Countries from all around the world send groups of athletes to compete against each other. At the 1972 Olympics in Munich, Germany, a group called Black September took the Israeli team hostage, and then they were trying to like negotiate like terms. They were trying to get the things they wanted, and then they were going to release the hostages. But instead, things went badly. The police ambushed the terrorists and killed a few of them, and all of the hostages were killed. This was again over anger at Israel. Right, the Black September is a Palestinian group who don't think that Israel should exist. And so they were trying to actually negotiate the release of some Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prisons. And that's why they took these athletes hostage and then killed them. Final example. Unless you thought that, I guess we let off with the US example, but another US example. This is from the 90s. In the mid 90s, during the Clinton administration, two white supremacists who hated the United States government blew up a federal building in Oklahoma City. It's called the Oklahoma City bombing. They rented a truck, filled it up with a huge amount of explosives, and you can see. Sorry, they're doing work. Can you shut my door? I'm sorry, I'm trying to do a video. You'll see the video. You're in it. You're going to be in the video. Umu and Kayla just came to my room in the middle of this video. I'll get you one I'll get you one. So, wow, they just came in the middle of my video. This is going to be so crazy when you guys are watching it later. Anyway, so they filled this truck up with explosives and then detonated it and blew this building up as a way to express their anger at the U.S. federal government. So there have been people who hated the U.S. federal government for a long time. How do governments respond to terrorism? What do they do about it? Well, for one thing, it used to be way easier to go to an airport. But after September 11th, they really stepped up security at airports. That's why if you've ever flown on a plane, you have to go through security and get checked. And sometimes they even pat you down because they want to make sure that you're not carrying any weapons. The government also stepped up surveillance, putting cameras in places to try to make sure that that they can see what's going on in sensitive locations, and gathering up people who they suspect of terrorist activity and putting them in detention facilities like at Guantanamo Bay, which you see pictured here. This has caused a lot of controversy and discussion, right? Because the question then becomes, well, how much do we want the government to do? How much do we want the government watching us, and how okay is it for them to hold people in detention centers because they suspect them of terrorism? So I forgot the thing again. So it's time for you to answer the AIM question: what causes terrorism? I've been talking about that throughout this video. You're going to need to answer the question in 3 to 4 complete sentences. And yeah, good job doing your vid notes. I'll see you in class.